Rolling on 6 now. Nonsense.
Welcome to another edition of Voices of the Writers, a reading of poems, vignettes, and stories for the Eat, Sleep, Write podcast. Welcome to a special reading of the Hadedah who lost his Dedah. This reading comes to you direct from a secret location at the North Pole. Elle was invited to read this story to Santa and the troops in a very special large hall used only for important visitors and grand occasions. The unexpectedly large audience was packed, with standing room only, comprised of 5,000 elves, 300 reindeer, and 100 members of Santa's extended family. Toy production was even halted for the reading, but no delays in production and delivery of toys is expected, as the story was so well received that after the reading, production went up because all the folks at the North Pole were re-energized by the tale.
The Hadedah Who Lost His Dedah, written and read by Elle Meadow. Once upon a time there was a Hadedah, otherwise known as Jim, who had an extraordinary musical talent. His call, ha, ha, Dedah, was the loudest, clearest, and most beautiful sound any Hadedah had ever heard. Whenever the flock swooped over the grasslands in the late evening calling out to each other, Jim would call out and the flock would go silent to listen. Naturally, this gave Jim an extraordinarily inflated opinion of himself. He took to calling at all hours of the day and night just to hear his voice. Equally naturally, this annoyed his flockmates, who soon thought that Jim's voice was not as extraordinary as they had first thought. It did not take long for the flock to call an enclave. They met at the nesting site in the eucalyptus trees on the hill. The leader of the flock called the meeting to order. Ha, ha, order, order. Ha, ha, cried the flock. We are here to discuss the problem of Jim. Ha, ha, agreed the flock. He must be called to order. Ha! A lone voice called, Dedah! And the flock turned as one bird and frowned at the youngster who had called out of turn. Ha, ha, called the leader. Jim must be asked to leave. Dedah, cried the flock. Ha, said the youngster who was a beat behind. The leader frowned. All in agreement then? Ha, ha, Dedah, agreed the flock. Dedah, echoed the youngster, but the flock ignored him. Thus it was that Jim was asked to leave the eucalyptus roost until he learned how to be quiet. The trees wept long strands of bark in sympathy as Jim made his musical farewell to the only home he had ever had. Ha, ha, Jim cleared his throat. Ha, ha. Silence. Jim tried again. Ha, 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 ha. But no matter how hard he tried, Jim just could not say Dedah. He couldn't bring himself to utter the traditional words of agreement used by the flock in enclave. He did not agree he was a nuisance. He did not agree he had to go. He was not going to say, Dedah, I agree, and he certainly was not going to agree to be silent in order to stay. Angrily, Jim flew off over the trees, calling, Ha! Ha! in a harsh and unmusical tone. Everywhere he went, Hadedahs asked him why he only ever said, Ha! Ha! in such horrible tones. When he told them his story, they would fall silent and wonder what he had done to deserve such a fate. Then as he flew off crying, Ha! Ha! they would join him, calling their agreements and sympathy. Ha! Ha! Dedah! But Jim never joined in with the last part of the call. Sadly, they would leave him, an outcast, forever marked by his refusal to moderate his cry. To this day, any lone Hadedah, outcast from the flock for any reason, will only ever cry, Ha! Ha! And if you hear one, know that you are hearing the lone voice of protest, crying out in its refusal to agree to be silenced.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Eat Sleep Right podcast, located at eatsleepright.net. Please send any questions, comments or suggestions to comments@eatsleepright.net. Please consider a donation to support the Eat Sleep Right podcast. Donations can be sent to our PayPal address at donations@eatsleepright.net. Once in a lifetime, the theme music for the Eat Sleep Right podcast, courtesy of Stephen Paul, all rights reserved, used by permission. Please join us again for the next edition of the Eat Sleep Right podcast.